water side, you know, is there any?
Feasibility of it.
This isn't pie in the sky, the concept. We have to let the contractor finish, and then we're gonna see what is left, and then we can, and then we can make a decision of how we want to develop that, what's in the best interest. But as far as long-range thinking and too, is combination of winter recreation, combination of summertime overlook and RV restroom and trailhead for Emeraldville. But we smartly design low maintenance and maintain. This idea of having people go out there and a free-for-all for RV, the answer is no. And the other question is, it goes back to this. Who's going to fund it? Who's going to maintain it? And what's the level of expectation? And if we can answer those questions, let's go have a lot of that's actually a parking lot that has been bastardized into a campground, and the EDA campground. And that was in preparation. We had a grant that was sunsetting, and we maximized the maximum parking area. And the grant was sunsetting.
Hey, Dutch. All right. Are you on the agenda? That is going to come to citizens' discussion of the agenda. Or you can take a look at it, Dutch, resolution. Is that for you? A resolution that is the request for the council to pass a resolution from the mayor to allow you to negotiate directly with the railroad. This is a meeting or two ago. Okay. We're negotiating.
There's a lot of stuff coming in.
Yep, the mayor's right here on number 9.
Yes, so.
I need that information to make position that,
That's cool. So then,
They're always I don't know about
I said it was not right.
Okay.
I don't know where it's coming from.
Thank you.
You know this area well.
We don't need gravel. If we talk about like dumping from an elevator, man, it's like more realistic.
I call to order Whittier City Council regular meeting Tuesday, November 20th, at 7 p.m. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Peter Denmark.
Here.
Victor Shen.
Here.
Monty Irving.
Here.
Dave Dixon.
Here.
David Pinkish is absent. Deborah Hicks. Here. And Dan Blair.
Here.
Can we get a motion to excuse Mr. Pinkish from tonight's meeting?
I'll make a motion to excuse David.
Any discussion? Calling for a vote, Dave Dixon.
Yes.
Monty Irving. Victor Shen.
Yes.
Deborah Hicks. Yes. Peter Denmark.
Yes.
And Dan Blair.
Yes.
Dave Pinkish is excused.
Okay. So, let the record reflect administration present. We have Jim Hunt, our city manager. We have a new police chief. And Scott Corby, our public works. Beatty's. Robert Beatty's our new police chief. And
Here. Sorry.
And that's it.
Andy Reid is here.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it. Okay. So I asked for a motion for approval of minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from October 30th and November 6th.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, calling for a vote, Dave Dixon.
Yes.
Victor Shen.
Yes.
Monty Irving.
Yes.
Deborah Hicks. Yes. Peter Denmark.
Yes.
And Dan Blair.
Yes.
Minutes were adopted.
Ask for a motion for approval of tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's regular meeting agenda with one amendment. I'd like to move item number 12 to item 5A. Item number 12, presentation from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers
to item 5A.
Can you change on the vice mayor as well? It's Dave Pinkish when it is now Peter Denmark. Go ahead and amend that.
It's fine.
Okay, so those two amendments to move presentation to 5A and then the changing of the vice mayor.
Yes.
And you make a motion,
Move item 12 to item 5.
yeah.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none? Unanimous consent?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, looks like we're ready for our presentation.
Mayor's report? We're already there.
Oh, I'm gonna let these guys warm me up.
Army Corps?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Mayor, if I can preface, Mr. Cadley's executive presentation. Over the last couple months during my short tenure here, I received questions, plus for my own education, questions from the public, well, Sports and Harbors, how did we get to where we are? And they're asking me, and so I thought, the best way, to handle this and maybe gracious enough, come here to kind of describe the process of how they go with the desired alternative project. This is Mr. Cadley.
Red means it's on, okay. Thanks, my name is George Cowley, and I'm here with two of my colleagues, Eric Johnson, who's an economist, and Brian Phillips, who's the project manager. And we just got asked to come out and brief the council on the status of the study. Brian and I were here in June, and since that time, the draft report's been put out for public review and agency review and our headquarters review, and we didn't get any real big hurdles or any showstopper comments from that process. We did get some comments from some locals here in the community that we will address in the final report. And the next step is to finalize up the report and put it out for a second review here in the next few months. So depending upon that, if it's still acceptable to the community. So we've heard some feedback, and maybe there's some questions that we asked. So what I passed out is it's very brief. It just shows what our selected alternative is based upon the engineering work done and the environmental and economic analysis we've done. It's a 6-lane breakwater protected boat launch at the head of the bay site here at the head of the fjord, and it's two of the different scenarios we looked at was a north-facing and a south-facing breakwater, and we selected a north-facing breakwater, so you come in towards the south to get in behind the breakwater into the launch ramp. And one of the items this accommodates is the desire of the future if the city wants to pursue expanding the facilities to provide moorage by excavating some of the uplands that are behind the breakwater. But that is not part of the proposal as it stands now. So it's just for a 6-lane protected boat launch, and we feel that will alleviate much of the congestion in the downtown core area by relocating some of the the daily and weekend and transient users that just launch their boats and then retrieve them at the current launch facility in the boat harbor by relocating those users to the separate site at the head of the bay. And there's also the second sheet details cost sharing and for the ultimate construction, if it were to be constructed. It's generally it's not easy a division of cost, but it's typically certain portions of it are cost shared 90-10, with an additional 10% being paid over a period of time following construction. So that would be ultimately 80% federal funds and 20% local funds. But then other funds are entirely what we call a local cost. They're for local service facilities, which is kind of a Corps of Engineers term, but that includes the boat ramp. So if you look on that table of the cost, I think it's maybe $6 million for a boat ramp. That's totally That's totally a local cost. So the other items, like for the breakwater and for an entrance channel to get into the launch ramp, that's what's cost shared 80/20. And something to note is that moorage areas are considered what we call a local service facility. So if the project were to include dredging of a moorage basin, that would be 100% federal cost. So the cost would increase, but, and the local share percentage would increase quite a bit because the federal government doesn't pay for moorage areas. And that's just like the laws we have to work within as dictated by Congress. And in July of 20, so when the study started out, we were looking at alternatives to alleviate congestion, including alternatives that provided moorage. So, you know, what you picture as a classical boat harbor with a moorage area at the head of the bay. But in July 2016, we were asked by the city to suspend consideration of alternatives that provided moorage because, if I recall correctly, we had some preliminary cost estimates at that time, and the city determined that they would not be capable of meeting the cost share of those larger alternatives that provide moorage. And so it's been about 2 years now that we have, since we suspended any further analysis of those alternatives. And so there's a question, I know there may be some questions about why we're just looking at a launch facility, and that would be why. So, with that, we can take any questions.
It's not a question, it's a comment. Thank you for this. I put some numbers on the artist conception, and it alleviates a lot of confusion by having these numbers. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, no problem. When we came out in June, they weren't quite ready yet, so,
Yeah.
but now, yeah, and then we had so since, I think it's been since July, the information's been available to yourself, to the city as well as the public, so in your draft report, so.
What was the essence of the decision to design this around a 6-lane boat ramp?
Well, we basically considered, I mentioned the north and the south orientation of the breakwaters. We also looked at 4 versus 6 lane boat ramps, and the 6, based on the economic analysis that Eric did, just alleviated enough congestion that it was worth it price-wise. So it accrued better, more benefits for that it justified the additional costs for the 2 extra lanes.
Thank you.
Yep.
So the development of a future boat harbor there would be on the city of Whittier. Is that, does your design take that into consideration, that dredging for a future boat harbor? Is it designed so that that could happen?
Yeah, so the feature of the north-facing breakwater, if we're facing the other way, you're kind of constrained by, I think it's Shakespeare Creek, the National stream there, so you wouldn't be able to expand the breakwater if you needed to, but with the north-facing, I mean, the way we have it sized now, you could fit some more behind it, but it may need to be extended slightly, so I think you would need to extend the breakwater slightly, but mainly would be just doing the actual construction of the barge basin, depending on how many vessels you're trying to accommodate. So initially, we were looking at a 150 vessel option and a 300 vessel option. So if you're going to go full board like a 300 vessel option, that breakwater would probably need to be extended slightly. So, but for a smaller option, it should be close to what you need.
The cost of 100 boat harbor would be, we'd be on the hook for that regardless.
Right. Unless you, I don't know what other like funding sources are available, you know, for the city per se, but I mean, the state used to help out a lot of communities when they have money in boat harbor construction. So, and that was a good relationship back when I got started this job between local governments and the federal government and state government, and then the funding kind of matched up well to cover a bigger proportion of the cost. But
Mr. Mayor, just a quick observation first. regarding function and funding opportunities. As we have, the cruise ships that come in and there are designated evacuation routes and locations, as was done in my former community, this is also an option. That area is identified as an emergency evacuation area for tenders, anybody coming in. So there are, whether it's CPV, state, cruise ship participation, there are avenues we can explore there. It's a real good possibility. But there's also, as Phil's going to address this, there are a couple pending issues right now regarding this project that need to be addressed. And one is the financial, the signature of the financial ability or the contribution for our share. And the other was, regarding the railroad and railroad property, the master lease, which, as we know, is ongoing and as far as we're concerned, identified in the comp plan and the development there. That we're still fulfilling our obligation there, but there is a timeline taking. I don't know if Mr. Phillips or George wants to address that.
Yeah, I'll just address those points. So, those issues, there are three things that we need to move forward with the project, and one of them is one you touched on, is the self-certification from the city, basically saying that you have the capacity to fund this project as we currently presented it. And so that's just a letter of good faith from the city with, now it's provided you with the forms that you need to submit for that. And we also just need a letter also saying that you support the project as we presented, so you support the plan that we're presenting. And then the final thing is that we know that there are some issues with the railroad and the city, one of them is regarding the lease. And the other one is regarding the spur line. As the spur line goes toward the coast, it and the road start to converge, and then that, as it gets closer, it exceeds the railroad's safety boundary. And they mentioned that in the letter that I provided you. And so those two issues, the convergence of the spur line on the road and the lease, we just need a letter from you assuring us that those issues will be handled before we go into construction.
Brandon, I know you were speaking with Bruce about potential paths forward for the city in the future to do the mortgage. Is there anything to add to what I said? Because I think you're more involved in those conversations.
Yeah, I think you explained it pretty clear, and then you just wanted to clarify. So, if going forward with mortgage, and this is regardless of whether we put it in the package as we put it as an alternative to be considered, or whether it was a future option after we go forward with this plan, any mortgage option is going to be what's called the local service facility, and that cost would be borne by the city entirely. And that's regardless of whether it's part of our package that we're putting an alternative now, or whether it's done in the future. Again, so the cost issue for that mortgage and those local service facilities are always going to fall on the city. I think the other point is, I know there's been some talk about stopping the process and then reconsidering a mortgage alternative. And we just want to be really clear and careful about that. And as most of you are aware, this project has been going on for many years. And it's because of the length of this project, it's exceeded some of our timelines. And we've got some dispensations to go forward with this, but if we were to stop it, then there's a real chance that that has the potential to kill this project. So our boss recommends that we don't stop this project, that we go forward with this project, and then the city consider mortgage as a later option.
Yep, I like what Brian said, thanks. They, in the timeline of this study, which basically, I think started 11 years ago, there's been lots of starts and stops, obviously, but the Corps of Engineers has started an initiative to shorten the timelines of their studies to prevent studies continuing on this long. So, like Brian said, we've exceeded all the new regulations for study lengths, but we kind of got grandfathered in since it had such a long history. But there's not much of a tolerance to at our headquarters level to stop a study that's so close to being finished. So just to take that into consideration, it would likely be terminated. We actually had a stoppage in the study. I think it was about 2 years ago after 2016, and that was kind of what happened. And we had to talk headquarters back into, explain the situation here in Whittier and how it's, it's different doing studies in Alaska with small towns. And so we kind of got a second life, but we're not expecting to be able to get another one. So
So there's two letters you need. Does one need to come before the other, or do they both need to come at, what's the timeline that would keep us from any further delay?
Well, the delays that we've incurred right now, we've had some delays on our ends that have been part of the modeling packages that we don't need to go into. So the letters that we need from you, there are three different letters. One is that here it says that you're going to work with the railroad to address those issues. One is self-certification of financial capacity, and then another is a letter of support. We haven't received those letters, but that has not delayed the project. We've addressed the modeling concerns and we'll be moving forward to progress. And so we hope to present what we call the director's report, which would finalize the feasibility study sometime in the next 3 months. That's what we're shooting for. We need to have those letters that I just described, I would say in the next month or so that we can move forward with this.
That's pretty quick.
I would say that the city was notified of these approximately 2 months ago, with the need for these letters.
And these are like non-binding, they're make us feel good kind of letters.
Right. So if you would look at the self-certification, again, it's saying that the city of Whittier has the financial capacity to support this project. It's pretty much as simple as that. It's not,
You're not committing yourself to funding this.
Yeah, exactly. So there's good and bad at that. Basically, it's a good faith sign on your part saying that you have the financial capacity to do this. The other one is just saying that you support this project and you support the design, and just so that our headquarters can have the assurance that we're not unilaterally going forward with this. It's not the core idea that the city supports this. And the other one is simply saying, we're not asking you to have the lease firmed up or to have the railroad issues firmed up. What you're doing is you're providing us assurance that you're going to work to have these done by the time we move forward with the construction.
When is the core, for us to move ahead optimally, the city needs to make a payment of some sort if we decide to move ahead. What kind of time frame? Was it a year from now? Is it 2 months from now?
Okay, so as far as the payment issue, the timeline I just described is when we complete the feasibility study. And George can talk more about this, but once we complete the feasibility study, then we take that package and then it goes for a funding request, for appropriations. We don't know when that's going to occur. And so this project is not going to move forward until we get to congressional funding.
So that comes down to pretty much politics and what Congress decides to fund. So, but your project here has a leg up, I guess could be an expression, on some others, because most of our projects we recommend a plan at the end of the feasibility study, and then you have to seek a second authorization and a second appropriation to construct the project. So you need, those are the two things you need to construct a project or to conduct a study with the Corps of Engineers: authorization to do it, and then appropriations, which is the money. When you got this initial study for the feasibility study, it came along with the construction authority. So that already exists, but you still need the funds. And so it's one last step, but the money's always the important thing. So when Congress, if and when they would decide to set aside money for the proposed plan there for the federal share, we don't know, but it would be at least a year or two out, based on just the way funding cycles work. But that's where a lot of local, talking to your congressional delegation and things like that.
So once we have the funding in place, when would this project be considered a shovel-ready project?
We would be doing, so the next phase for construction we call pre-engineering and design, PED. I use the acronym so much I gotta remember what it stands for. But that's where we actually come up with the plans and specs to construct it, and then you have to put it up for bid, and that generally takes like a year. And then after that, you put it up for bid, and then it would go up for construction. And a project, do you recall what we're thinking for construction duration, Eric? or-
We had initially thought 2020 to 2022 for construction, but again, it just depends on funds being appropriated by Congress.
Because when we go to Juneau and ask for state contributions, which said, this is the only stuff they're funding at the moment is federal match.
Federal match, okay.
And so when we go there, one of the questions they're going to ask us is it shovel ready? But it doesn't sound like we need to be going there this year.
No, yeah, it's not shovel ready. I mean, that's our process. We first come up with a recommended plan, and it's basically, it's like a schematic, like handed out, and we have quantities calculated, come up with a cost estimate. But then to get something that can actually be constructed, we have to develop the plans and specs and such. So, looks like Jim wants to add to it.
And Mr. Mayor, but we can put it on the radar.
Yes.
Definitely, and this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, most funding requests, you know, you usually need to plan a few years out due to like federal and state funding cycles, so you have something in the queue. So it's never too early to start, getting on the radar of the people you need to help you out. But yeah, we wouldn't be asking you for money like next council meeting, let's say.
Okay.
So. But that's one of the difficulties we have. We have to predict out in the future, like due to the benefit cost ratio and all that. We have to assume like when it's going to be constructed, discount the dollars from the future and the current dollars, and that's all that Eric gets to do. So he assumed for that 20 to 22 construction period. Okay, thanks.
Are there any more questions from council? Do we have questions for Mr. Goldstein?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I just want to thank the court for making the presentation, and Brent, thanks for the conversations that we had. According to my records, we had an option of 3 plans as late as 2017. That was in the beginning of 2017. One was for the boat launch facility. I think that was a 4-lane boat launch facility. The second was for the 150 slip harbor with a much bigger breakwater, and the third was for a 300 slip harbor with a little bit longer breakwater. The problem I see here, number one, is that there was no community involvement in this. This was a project that basically the Corps came up with, presented to 1 or 2 people, and this thing just kind of took on its own wheels and rolled along. According to the comprehensive plan, which went back to 2007, there were calls for a harbor facility, and I happened to be on the council at that time, and I remember the discussion, and Councilor Denmark was on there too. There was a lot of discussion about development at the head of the bay, and this harbor would be probably a seed to generate growth over at the head of the bay. I guess I've got a couple of questions here. In the WRDA Act, 2007 WRDA Act, there was a cap of $35.2 million. And I'm just wondering, is that $35.2 million the total cost of the project, or is that strictly what the feds would be asked to provide?
I don't know the answer to that. I have to research it because I'm not familiar with it. From that far back, I don't.
I'm not that familiar with that. Okay.
So let me write. So WRDA 2007.
Right. The WRDA Act was it was part of the 2007 bill, and that wasn't actually approved until 2012. And the language of it specified an amount of $35.2 million. I haven't seen the cost of the boat launch facility. Do you have?
There might be an extra
figures on that?
Yeah.
All I need to know is the figure. Okay, so the federal cost, and that is provided at the 80% with the 10% holdback and so forth. Okay, so that's 13 million. And the Whittier cost is basically 9.8 million. And again, this gets back to the question of this $35.2 million cap, which is the most we can get for this project. This comes up to 22 million, which still leaves $13 million. When you create a project like this, you mobilize and you demobilize, you bring people down, you house them. The idea of putting in a small breakwater and then assuming or making the assumption that, oh, down the pike, we'll be able to add on to that if we need to. I think you're treading on thin ice. We don't have a lot of ice out there right now. But it just seems to me that the optimal thing to do here is to go with the larger breakwater, which would facilitate the 150 slip recreational harbor. Go ahead with the dredging, and I've got some numbers on that too, and try to utilize this $35.2 million. At least that's my opinion. And again, I'm speaking as an individual. 2 other people made the decision to follow this direction here. I really would like to see this vetted before the community and actually become, again, as it has been in the last 2 comprehensive plans, part of that. If we went ahead and extended the breakwater to what was the old option 2 and did that dredging, it obviously would add more cost, but it would take advantage of mobilizing and demobilizing. I would ask too, what time frame, if we did put slips in there, would that be something we would have to do the following year, or in 5 years, or 10 years, or is there any time?
That's up to the city.
Okay, so
we don't have any bearing on that unless we construct a boat launch facility.
okay, so well, if we decide to go with just the boat launch facility, but basically the Corps' responsibility is the breakwater and the dredging.
Yeah, entrance channel.
Right.
And the breakwater, and what we call the new channel.
Right. Right. So if we extend the breakwater out, as in the old option 2, and do the dredging for that area, we could wait 10 years to put the floats in there. And we still have a launch and retreat facility.
So for, you say dredging now, if it's dredging for moorage, that's a local cost.
Right. No, I totally understand.
Just want to make sure.
Totally understand. Yeah. Okay. Just for numbers' sake, the Port of Anchorage spends $10 million. They don't spend it. It's part of the Corps. There's $10 million a year for about 100 acres of dredging. Now that's done every year. The amount of silt that comes out of the Knik and the Susitna contribute to that, and some of the Turnagain Arm silt does too. And I'm sure that dredging for this harbor would be a lot more arduous than just dredging year to year and taking off a little bit of silt that does occur. But if you look at 100 acres for $10 million, that equals out to $100,000 per acre. And it seems to me that if we do dredge over at the head of the bay, even if it's 10 times that, that's $1 million for dredging, for 1 acre. If we have 2 acres, it's about $2 million. When I stopped and thought about creating a breakwater, and I know federal regulations, I worked for the feds for 37 years, and I know that that adds to a lot of cost. But basically what you're doing is taking rock and putting it out in the water. And you're building that up so there's a breakwater. And for the life of me, I can't imagine that being super, super expensive, especially since we have a spur line from the railroad over there. And we also have facilities here to help with that too. The Innovative Readiness Training Group basically informed us that they might be able to help with a project like this too. There are other sources of help and revenue. I think the Prince William Sound Economic Development District is one. I think the state has also offered help. And I know you can actually use other federal funds to basically make up this 20% match here. This is a golden egg. But the goose that laid this is a pretty big goose. And in my way of looking at things, first thing that needs to happen here is the community needs to get behind this, or at least know what's going on. This is presented to the council. I suspect that some people are watching on television. But the way this has operated in the past, it's gone through the Ports and Harbor Commission. The Ports and Harbor Commission sets up a venue for people to comment on it, give input, then there's feedback, and then it moves on to a recommendation to the council, and then it goes from there. Peter.
Hey, Mr.
I'll wrap it up.
No. The notion of, I want to offer a contrary opinion to the lack of public input on this project. We go back to 2008. City Manager Ernest's conceptual drawing for the head of the bay included a marina as well as a boat ramp. When we started the harbor development here and closed the west ramp, integral to those plans was offering a boat launch at the head of the bay. There are existing resolutions passed both by Ports and Harbor and the City Council approving the notion of a boat ramp at the head of the bay. This has been in the public eye for over 10 years. And I know that you're not the only contrary opinion out there. There are more than one, and there are arguments and counter-arguments, but this has been in front of the public for a long, long time. And as usual, when things start coming to a head here a little bit, is when people start to take notice. But this has been under conversation for over a decade.
I totally agree. I would take that a step further. The idea of a facility at the head of the bay with a launch facility over there was part of the bigger concept of a harbor with slips over there. As late as 2017, there were 3 options on the table. The first was a launch facility, the second was a launch facility with a 150 slip harbor, and the third was a very elaborate, extensive project with 300 slips dredging all the way back into the land. So this, what you're talking about, the concept, yes, has been it's been in the mill for probably 13 years. But as far as the specific focus of just a launch and retrieve facility at the head of the bay, my personal view is this is absurd. This is absurd. You will generate about $60,000 a year with that. If you put a 150 slip harbor in there, you have the potential of creating about $425,000 a year revenue to the city. And that's with property tax, that's with slip fees, that's with launch and retrieve fees. And if we go with this medium breakwater, if you look at the concept between the first 3 projects that were still on the table in 2017, the first breakwater was a small one because it was basically this launch and retrieve facility. In the new design, that breakwater is even smaller. Okay, the second one was significantly bigger breakwater than the first launch and retrieve facility. The third one, which was the Cadillac, was a little bit more than the middle one. So, in my view, try to utilize the $35.2 million, go with a larger breakwater, go with with this dredging in there, and then, as time permits, come up with a plan to fund slips, launch facilities, etc. You're going to have launch and retrieve facilities in there anyway. But it seems to me better to do this right the first time than to do a third of it, or maybe a quarter of it, and then a couple of years down the pike say, now we need to find other funds.
So, thanks for that, Mr. Goldstein. George, when we've been talking about this launch ramp facility for a while, and I was led to believe that part of the benefit cost ratio for that launch ramp, we as a community actually commit to build all 6 ramps at a reasonably, in other words, we can't just say we're going to do it and not do it, because then the cost benefit ratio doesn't bear up.
Right, then we don't realize the benefits, but, yeah, sorry.
Because I had originally said, well, I'm not sure we can afford all 6 immediately, so what if we do 2? And that's where we started having this conversation about, well, you really want to, the longer you take to build 6, the smaller the cost benefit happens, the cost ratio. And so when we start talking about building harbors, the same would be true. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, the federal government's going to offer some assurance that you're going
Yeah. So
to pay for your portion. And so typically, for a larger construction project, like with the moorage and the breakwater, like Mr. Golson mentioned, the mob and demob cost of the equipment's very expensive. So typically, I believe what happens is it'll be done in one contract, but in one contractor comes in to do all the work, but the local government is responsible for a portion of of the contract costs, and then the federal government. And that's a way to save, maybe less costly by having multiple mobilizations. So that was a good point.
So one of the things that was on the minds, well, at least when we as a council considered we only considered 2 plans. One was a launch ramp, one was a 150 boat harbor slip. But what presented this as a more attractive plan for me is that the dollar figure as far as Whittier cost, whatever it is we can't get out of the state, we have to come up with.
Right.
And it's a more conservative, but it doesn't, just because we settle on this launch ramp facility, it doesn't mean that we can't continue on and build a boat ramp.
Correct. I mean, once we build the breakwater, you're free to add to your launch facility, and if you want to add more in the future. The only criteria would be if you the breakwater is still considered like a federal project, so that if you do need to alter it, or you would need to work with us to get to do that the right way, and that's it.
But by waiting, say, 10 years, we don't cause the cost-benefit ratio to change because it's not part of the... In other words, it seems like a more conservative approach if money is limited.
Once this project is funded for construction, the benefit-to-cost ratio is kind of, I don't think it really plays a role anymore.
It doesn't matter as much anymore.
It's just, it's kind of a metric they use in DC to kind of weigh different, it's European nationally for these funds, so that's one of the metrics, along with political pressure and environmental concerns and priorities that each administration. So the benefit to cost ratio, I mean, it's mandated we have to have it above 1, and general policy is it should be, if it's above 2.5, that's great. 2 is pretty good, but there's different administrations at different kind of thresholds for what they want to see to recommend the project for construction. But once it's constructed, no one's keeping track of, the Corps probably should keep track of the benefits as accruing, but I don't know if we really...
I don't think the Corps nationally goes back and looks at every single project that they've built to see how well the benefits are.
So I'm not going to come back out and see, or none of these guys to see, if you've got to leave your boat ramp closed, or if only 4 have been constructed thus far, because you're still raising the funds for the other 2.
Mr. Mayor, I could toss something in there, and also keeping in mind the time for these gentlemen. We also started looking for state participation in the ramp and not carrying that load all by ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And on the other side, so I just want to just kind of recap where we were. Whether it's by consensus, to go ahead, and we appreciate your public service all the way around for these questions. And that would be, and I'm willing to do that, and willing to take it on to work with the railroad regarding spur money, which should be easy enough. Signing, we're authorizing me to sign, the city is financially stable to support the project, and that they will support the project. Because, hearing, the pros and cons and the benefits, and the prospects there, if we don't act, we're gonna drop the bottom of the list, so it's gonna be a long time, in my experience.
It may be a never rate.
Right.
And I'll follow up on this, the 35.2 million, and where I do not know about that, and to add more uncertainty to it, then you need to figure out if that means just for if it's a cap on the federal funds or the overall funds, because that makes a big difference. Obviously, you're talking about 80/20 cost share. So I'll see what I can find out about that and report back.
Do you happen to have a drawing, a conceptual drawing of the 150 slip harbor and the 300 slip harbor that shows?
We had some preliminary schematics. I don't have it with me, but that's something I could provide. And if you guys want an idea of what we thought they would cost, we had costs from like 2 years ago, and they're not even to the scale of what they handed out. But 150 vessel was estimated to be 35 million total, with 20 million of that being the local cost share due to the mortgage, and a 300 vessel basin would be 55 million, with approximately 35 million being the local share. And that was in 2016 dollars, and didn't account for if there might be contaminated soil. These estimates include like a contingency for things like that, so they're kind of conservative because we may encounter contaminated soil. So these numbers I just read off, like they're not conservative. They probably should be a little bit higher, but that's the only numbers we have because we stopped effort on those. So I'll try to provide schematics. I'll get them to Jen. Yeah.
Mr. Cosar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have two real quick questions here. If there's a cap or if this is $22 million for the whole project over here, once this is spent, are there excess funds that we can utilize, or once this is spent, we have to go through the whole process to get federal funds?
Since I'm not familiar with the cap that you're mentioning, I really can't speak to that. Typically, all I can say is that when we do a study and we have funds left over, if it comes in under budget, then those funds can be used for if we move into the planning PED phase, pre-engineering design, where we develop plans and specs, and that money can be carried over. But we're pretty much, when I came in June, was to ask for more money, so we're pretty much at the budget level here, so that's not the case for the study.
Okay, just one other question, George. If the council decided to go with the second option and extend the breakwater and do additional dredging, it doesn't seem like it would take a long time to figure out the additional costs of that, right?
I don't.
Right, a couple of weeks.
I don't think so. The bigger question would be whether or not that would be considered a locally preferred plan, and that would, again, because the breakwater would be longer than what it needs to be based on the current purpose of the study project, which would be boat launch, and that if it's a locally preferred plan, then the additional cost of the locally preferred plan becomes a local cost as well. So.
But if there's a federal cap or a federal fund of $35.2 million, we can spend up to that for the 80% of the cost.
To be honest, I've been working at the district for like 17 years, and I'm not familiar with it. I have no experience with a situation like that, so I have to do some research to get back to you.
Make it a little more simple. If there's $13 million that's going to cost the Corps to do this, for this small breakwater, if you double the size of the breakwater and the turning basin, how much would that add?
I don't know. I've never worked in a project where we were trying to design it to like a maximum amount that was set in legislation. It's always been based upon what the benefits justify, what the benefit cost ratio.
Well, we have a finance person who addresses that.
one thing that gets tricky, can you guys all hear me okay?
Yeah.
From the economics perspective, if we're adding cost to the project like that, we need to be able to justify that with benefits. So if you're adding cost to create moorage, but it's on the promise of moorage at some future unknown date, it's difficult, meaning I can't actually justify including benefits for that moorage to my higher headquarters, because we don't know if and when that moorage would actually go in. So it would be one thing if we could say with reasonable certainty from you guys that the moorage would be going in year 1, or year 5, or year 10. And that way I could count those benefits and include that in the benefit cost analysis. But we don't have enough information to say when, if and when that moorage would go in, so it makes it basically impossible to justify that higher cost for those alternatives.
So can we go ahead and sign something to keep the project moving ahead and then make a change to extend the breakwater in the turning basin?
I'll hand that one over to George.
Yeah, I've actually asked at my office, I was expecting a comment like that about the alternative that you pointed out, so, and, because I agree with what your points are about that, and I was told that we may be able to do like an optimization of the breakwater design during the design report plans and specs. So that's something I could get, that's something I've had on my list of things to do to describe that during the report, but I haven't gotten around to yet, but that's something I plan to work on.
So the door is still left open
So the schematic there isn't like the final, and it could be longer as long as it's just, if we can still support the benefits. So when you actually go and design it to the plans and specs, you can optimize it to be at the best design. So we could get it a little longer, but I can't make any promises about what we can justify right now.
Could the city interject 150 slip harbor in there, or is that, once you're looking at a boat launch facility, is that option off the table?
Mr. Mayor, I know we can continue this conversation, but again, we're under time constraints here.
All right,
Thank
we're
you.
gonna,
Yes, sorry, thanks for putting this first, but sorry with the tunnel being closing, yeah.
no, thanks, very informative, and I appreciate your giving us time.
I'm happy to continue these conversations, maybe with our, it sounds like you're in touch with Brand, so.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm working all through the holidays, so I'll be around, so. But that's a good point about the alternative too, because it's a longer breakwater, which would be it would better accommodate future expansion to moorage. But we have this nuance where if it's solely for moorage, we can't claim like benefits built it and they will come, and then someone at headquarters will tell us, well, we prefer a plan, and it's going to have like a few $1 million a year cost. So that's kind of the gray area that I'm concerned with.
We also want to be aware of the cost-benefit ratio value we have now. And if that value goes down, then that would affect the success or not success of this project. So,
That's the part we're still negotiating. Brand mentioned some model negotiations, the model of our benefits. So within the next week or two, we hope to have that finalized, and that'll give us a better idea.
okay, well, let's
That's
figure that.
that's the last piece of the puzzle for us, in addition to what Brand talked about for others.
But a cost ratio of 1.9 is pretty favorable.
Yeah.
Is that, okay.
Especially in Alaska. So
We're often lucky if it's 1 in Alaska.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll provide you with data sets and data points for the expansion that Mr. Goldstein is talking about.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the mayor's report. I had all kinds of fun at AML, and I only stayed one day. So my takeaway from the mayor's conference was PERS was considered a threat to municipalities. PERS is at the moment, I believe it's like an $8 billion Goliath sitting out there, and the state is looking at ways to possibly push more and more of that debt, unfunded debt, towards the municipality. So it's a huge liability, and the problem was made by the state. So small municipalities like Whittier, anyways, we have to keep an eye on that. As far as communities in general, all the communities are in agreement that providing services to our communities is the most important thing, while keeping a close eye on our budget. And then as far as us as a community participating in helping the state through these times where the price of oil is not where we'd like it, the most productive thing that we can do for our community is to grow our economy. And the state may welcome our efforts to utilize idle state land in Whittier. So, and we know what land that is.
What land is that?
And that's it. That's it. Mr. Vice Mayor, do you have a report?
Nothing specific other than to offer, as given the opportunity to speak as Vice Mayor at every meeting, my main focus here is going to be trying to schedule the development of administrative policies and working on our code to make it more consistent. And these points will come up later in the meeting when we get some other agenda items, but I will use this seat to make some noise about that at every meeting, and it will come up later in the meeting tonight.
Thank you. Moving on to the manager's report. Mr. Hunt?
Thank you, Mayor. I had a full week of AML last week, from Monday to Friday. Met with several of our council members in attendance. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'll be following up with everybody. You know, in addition to that, and again, PERS, as the mayor said, is still always the #1 concern for AML members and non-members. You know, keeping it locked in at 22%, so the burden doesn't fall to us. I just wanted to, I have my little handout for council. It's been busy Monday into Tuesday. I do want to just publicly thank DOT for issuing the ton of passes for all those involved in the derelict vessel project. That was very kind of them. And they acted fairly quickly on that. On the finance department side, just for everybody's knowledge, we do have our part-time person who's familiar with their system, drilling down and drilling in. It's a little more serious than we thought. I'm not talking embezzlement, just as far as policies and practices followed and things not posted. We had the one highly qualified applicant for the finance director position, and I should also remember there were 5 or 6 other communities looking for finance directors. You know, even communities a little larger, they're beginning to become hard to find. But we have contacted the CPA firm, and she's going to be in touch with our person so they can share information to now try to establish the cost and the depth and the amount of work it's going to take to get us back on track just as quickly as we can. And so, if there's anything else, any questions, other stuff, you know, it's going to come up for, you know, common cause and thread that we can all work on here towards the end of the meeting, so I think that'll be very efficient.
Jim, the last time we had an audit, everything was great with the audit except the interface with the harbor. The harbor didn't pass the audit, basically. It was the auditor said was in this report.
I would have to take a look at it and as to what they call exceptions or things that they point out.
Yeah.
And I can take a look at that from the investment side.
So has the auditor come and presented to us the 2017 audit? Don't they usually do that? Don't they give us a, hey, I mean,
Yeah, we usually see the previous year's audit later in the buy now.
yeah.
And they were here, right? I remember them being in the office last year.
I don't have an office, I have a document, but I'm not familiar.
We pay them, when we pay them that much money, we expect to have to suffer through their report.
Yeah.
I concur. Yeah, I'm sorry, I wish I had the knowledge or information to tell you.
Well, hopefully you'll.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
What would happen, but yeah.
Okay.
But we have not seen the results. The audit was done,
Yes, yeah.
but it's usually done in 2018 for 17, yeah.
So, I'm expecting them to come forward, we might give them a little reminder that they forgot to do that. Please. Any other questions for our directors?
Any directors?
Oh. Yeah.
Well, as,
Oh, our new public safety director?
Yes, sir. Good evening. I'm Robert Dady. I'm sorry, what?
Press the button.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Good evening. I'm Robert Dady, newly sworn in Director of Public Safety as of yesterday morning. I'd like to take a few minutes and introduce myself and let you get to know me or whatnot. So, I was able, first of all, I want to say it's a real honor to be here. I'm really looking forward to working with the council and the community. I've been in law enforcement for roughly the last 32 years. I was a state trooper for about 20 and a half years, retired as a sergeant, and after that became a chief of police in the city of Cordova for about 18 months. And then after that, went over to the city of Yakutat, and I was the director of public safety there for, I think, a little under 5 years. I've done contract work as a police officer for the departments. And a little bit about me is that in my career in law enforcement, I've held just about every position there's available. I've worked I worked in homicide for 5 years. I was undercover for a period of time, a trainer, and a supervisor and whatnot. So I bring those skills with me and plan on using those skills to help develop this department. I received a very in-depth briefing from Chief Russell yesterday about the department and the direction that he was bringing the department. And I must tell you that I've known Chief Russell for over 20 years professionally. Our paths have crossed. Very respectful gentleman in the community and law enforcement. So he'd actually called me a couple months ago and asked if I'd come down and help in Whittier, and I jumped at the opportunity and actually called up a couple other long-term associates to bring here too. So our goal since coming has been to help build up this department, to strengthen the core of the policing here and meet the community's needs. So that is something I look forward to continue doing. Right now, based on briefing that I received yesterday and just getting to know the office, I'm reviewing budgetary stuff. I'm trying to work with our computer system, our report writing system, and stuff like that to be more efficient and again, professional. Excuse me, one of my beliefs in law enforcement, I've spent a lot of time, at least half my career, in rural areas, if not more, and truly believe in being part of the community. I believe in having our officers be part of the community and participating in events and getting to know people. So that's one thing I will be passing on to the officers as well, that we do serve the public and that we are part of the public. So other than that, I must confess, I'm sorry, I noticed there's no police packet in the packet there. My apologies, I wasn't aware I needed to do that yesterday. I actually did look at the stats yesterday. I can't quote the figures, but what I can tell you is the activity level was pretty standard for this area, both here and also Girdwood. I actually did speak on the numbers for Girdwood last night at the GPOS meeting that I attended, and what I wanted to point out to them specifically.
Would that help at all?
I think that was probably GPOS.
Is that just for Girdwood? Okay.
Yes, yes. Was that, again, the activity level was pretty normal. I think it's in the about 90 calls for the month. And it was about the same for Whittier. But I wanted to point out the amount of public appearance and the security checks that the officers were doing, just to show that, you know, they are out there making their presence known and checking on the businesses and property of others and that type of stuff. So with that said, again, it is an honor to be here. I look forward to meeting and working with the council, and if there's any questions that you have for me, I'd be happy to answer them. Sir.
Hi, my name is Peter Denmark, the Chief Beatty, and I expected to see Mr. Russell here tonight on the agenda, so I'll have a follow-up question for him, but it's great to see you on board, and I wish you well coming into Whittier. I have to be a little bit careful here. It is not my position to tell any city staff what to do, but if I could please receive this only as a suggestion. Since our recent changes over the last year, there's been a disconnect with the police department and the local community. We have a changing population over the last 5 years, where our population has gotten younger. Our school has grown in the meantime. So the point being, we have a number of new people in town. And what I think would be a positive exercise for the community is a letter to the community via just a box mailing would do it, an explanation of available services in Whittier. Basically, one of the things that came from before the Girdwood contract is that the locals, we always wanted 24/7 police coverage in town. It was only 15 years ago when we were working with one police officer only. And as well as a statement of coverage for the police department, I think a statement of coverage for EMS is important. People don't know what our limitations are here.
Mm-hmm. And
in my, not so tongue-in-cheek comment that some people think is funny is this is a bad place to have a heart attack in the middle of the night. And the locals, need, they need to know what our limitations are here in the wintertime and the difference between our summertime and our wintertime coverage. And the fire department is important as well, but I think that more common interface with the public is police and EMS with the general public.
Yes, sir, thank you for your suggestion, and that, I think it's a great suggestion. I'd be happy to write something like that for the community. And I'm sorry to hear that there's been a disconnect with public safety and the community. What I can tell you is that the view of myself and a couple of the senior officers that we've actually been able to bring in is the exact opposite. We want to be part of the community. One quick example I might give is when we had the bear problem. We ended up having to dispatch the bear, unfortunately, but we did take the opportunity to make a presentation to the school for a biology lesson, and it was really well received. The whole school was able to attend, those that wanted. And that's the kind of commitment we're looking at, is being part of it.
And I hear that they're moving in that direction, but there are still people here unaware of what is available to them for services. And so thank you for receiving that, as you may or may not. And my other question is a follow-up from Chief Russell from last meeting. I don't know if he shared this with you, but there was an illegal bear hunt in October in Whittier. A bear was killed out of season as a function of our municipal code. A bit of a kerfuffle around town and trying to get our code didn't offer any solution to the problem or any avenue of follow-up. But my question to Greg, and he had indicated that he would bring this information to tonight's meetings, was that bear that was killed sealed and reported to the state within its 30-day period as mandated? Without bringing any names. Do you bring this up at all in your conversations?
I'm aware of the situation. I wasn't aware of your question to him, so what I will tell you is I will research that and get back with the council.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a harbor master here? Are you the harbor master
No, sir.
today?
No, sir.
I had a couple of follow-up questions from the last meeting as a function of the harbor master's report. Is that
I excused him for this evening,
okay?
without going into details, so if you like, pass it to me now immediately.
Yeah, just wanted to follow up on the Bellingham engineering report.
Right.
The DeLong dock damage, and we were gonna find out if our insurance had any play with that disaster.
I know that the long report is gone in, I haven't examined it in detail, so we'll be forwarding that, and then we'll hopefully have our insurance.
That was the question, whether insurance was in play or not. And that there was some discussion of a DeLong dock enterprise fund that probably, if it's gonna happen, should take some form over the course of the winter.
Agreed.
And then my only other comment was, we've only got a month before the fee schedule for the harbor is supposed to be up. And these are questions I would have posed to.
And I had a discussion with them, I believe it was last week or yesterday regarding the fee schedule. That gave us a week before.
Thank you.
Council, I have a long list of report in your packet. It's the first one last couple of months. I just sat down and did a brain dump on you, so. It's a current state of the union of public works and water wastewater. What I wanted to bring forth to you guys is 2 weeks ago, the water wastewater staff attended training at the Alaska Rural Water Association annual conference. It's mandatory training for water wastewater staff to receive 3 CEUs, which is continuing educational credits for recertification of their license. I attended junior territory as well as Cam Bender, city water operator. We got our credits and we'll be able to renew our licenses. But at that conference, we submitted a water sample and for the best tasting water in Alaska. We have one that, yeah, again, it's the sixth time in the last 11 years. So I encourage you, it's kind of a proud moment for my staff to receive that honor. So if you see my staff in public, please let them know your appreciation of their dedication, their hard work, and congratulations on that to them. So with that being said, we offered to send our senior water operator to go represent the city of Whittier at the National Convention in Washington, D.C. He has declined that. The city manager and myself, we are talking about whether or not we should send a representative from Whittier to that and potential activities there that could include seeking funding with our federal delegation. We're waiting for the agenda to come out at the national conference to see if our delegation will be in attendance. If they are, I feel that we should be represented there. Just a slim chance that we win the national title. When we did it, I believe it was in 2015, we took fifth in the nation. So we have very good water here. We don't treat our water. It's a very simple system, but sometimes simple is the best. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, moving on to commission's committee reports. Ports and Harbor Commission? Parks and Rec?
We had a brief meeting just before this meeting. I want to thank Nichols and Mike for coming down and supporting our efforts in Parks and Rec. Really appreciate that. We discussed some ideas, got some maps out. We're talking about winter recreation ideas, really looking at Shotgun Cove Road area and some of the possibilities that we've got out Shotgun Cove. Victor is hoping to establish some campsites, some tent platforms out near Emerald Cove area in conjunction with a group called Overland Service. A guy named Thomas Gwynn has contacted Victor, and I think that they like to work in remote sites, and that one beachhead there right at the entrance of Emerald Cove would be a real good opportunity to provide some camping spots and a rest area for people that are trying to come, maybe having a hard time getting into Passage Canal, fighting the wind. That'd be a good place for them to stop and rest and maybe spend the night. Victor has also gone out and flagged the connector trail and getting prepared to, I think with Nick's help, we may get some gravel and some lumber hauled up there during the winter on snow machines so that we can get some more work done on the connector trail between. It'll be connecting Horsetail Falls Trail to the new city park, so that's what I call the connector trail. But that's something we have to look forward to this next year. So we'll be really busy this next summer with Park and Rec. And yeah, that's right. We're just trying to establish some cross-country speed trails, slow machine trails, and doing some exploration during the winter.
Okay. Community school?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'll make it short and sweet. Some of the past events we've taken kids to that have been pretty exciting is we took all of our first through all of our older kids, really, so 35 odd kids, to the Black Violin, which was two guys playing violin at the Performing Arts Center. Pretty cool, talking about stigma and just really you can do whatever you want to do. You wouldn't think these two guys played violin and played it the way they did. It was pretty amazing. Some awesome smiles on kids' face. It was also a good time for us as the staff to realize doing those types of things isn't always easy for us. It makes for a long day with kids. But to see those smiles on those faces of those kids that would never have that opportunity is a pretty amazing thing. We also sent 2 kids out to Titlik for a welding camp. There was an AvTech certified welder that led it was about a 2-day course for these kids to kind of just get their fingers wet with welding. I think we've got 2 kids now that are pretty excited to continue welding, and we look for ways to continue to provide that for those kids. And we just came back from in-service for a few days as teachers. We're still working on reviewing standards and reviewing what we're offering at school to make sure that we're continuing to offer what is best for kids with our continuing enrollment, not only here in Whittier, but across our whole school program. I invite you all to come to Thanksgiving lunch tomorrow at noon. As always, there will be a lot of food. So come hang out. If you can stay longer, come hang out longer and play games with kids and just interact with them. No school this Thursday and Friday. We have an EAC meeting coming up December 6th at 6 o'clock, where we'll continue to talk about some of the EAC's goal in improving the school. Our Christmas holiday program is going to be December 19th at 5:30 with another potluck there. So again, come see kids do. I'm not sure what the plan is yet, but then come have some good food. Couple Voyage School opportunities. I like to plug where we send our kids. We just sent 1 kid to a first track phase, so it's basically for middle school kids for a week to go stay at our Voyage School in Anchorage and to get their feet wet in kind of living on their own and what it would be like to transition to college and after high school. So we had 1 kid do that. We have the upcoming phases that we actually don't have anybody from Whittier going to, but I'll talk about it as the Journey to Flight. We have 1 kid in the district that has, in the last year and a half, received his private pilot's license through this program, done all the solo work. So it's a pretty amazing achievement for that kid, and we look to continue to do that, and maybe we can get somebody from Whittier involved with that. They're also offering business careers and community health careers, so again, some opportunity for kids to just go check out different careers that are offered within the state and local areas. And I am still looking for a breakfast cooking janitor. So again, if you know anybody looking for a job, send it my way. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, on the agenda on my iPad is an executive session. Is that the one that was posted? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So,
Mr. Mayor, was there a request for some conversation during citizens? Agenda item number 9?
For citizens' comments on agenda items, unfortunately, it's not on the agenda.
Thank you.
If council wanted that to happen, I could, it's just not in our, it's not on our agenda. But before we go into executive session, would it be possible for us to take a quick break? And come back in about 10 minutes? Mr. Goldstein?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I did have something with the Prince William Sound OCAC.
Yeah, you can call the break into an executive session and then come back into executive session. To let people know, I suppose.
I was going to take a break before, but...
But so we're going to take a break and come back and then go into an executive session, which these people won't be able to attend, right?
No, but we shouldn't be that long. I mean, what, is there a different venue? You want to do the break after?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I just thought that it was cumbersome to have a break and then come back, call an executive session, make everybody leave. To make them wait for a break to be told to leave the room.
I was actually hoping to catch up with Annie with regard to what Dutch has asked him for.
Don't let me get in the way, I'm all for taking a break, excuse me.
Okay.
That's great, yeah.
I'm always confused, Dan. It's good to see Annie with her hair down for the first time. Always has.
Are you gonna be around tomorrow? Stick around for lunch.
Good.
Hot in here, but I got
Yeah. Come to lunch. Lunch you eat on the morning. Or leave on the morning.
I've been here since, second year. Yeah, so we worked actually on the vacation in Eastern Europe. I texted you. Just got back 3 days ago. It was nice, it was 3 weeks.
I've lost it.
We've been out and seen all those classic sites. Went to.
I don't know.
Yeah, and traveled.
Got it. Well, maybe you didn't get it, but you did something.
The fictional characters was based on lab.
It's coming later.
There's a lot. You probably watched one.
I'll just do that too. Forget what I gotta do now. Bloody, gory, I'm going. You know, once it goes to the top, that's fine. Yeah. They don't come in. Yeah, I've been out.
Fresh waters and
Well, you did.
You know, I probably played ball against them. I graduated in 1980. Yeah, you're right. Great place.
Great.
I know. Me too. I'm
Great city. There is no president for Alaska in the first place. What? No kidding. I know we I really see it as a job.
Yeah.
Well, it's probably a way better economy in Louisiana too.
Yeah, I think twice.
I know, it's so crazy. So you work in BTI right now? Gotta take a break. I'll stop after you guys.
No, I understand you are not.
This is the president of the. Hello. How are you? I'm alright. Hey, I just want to tell you, it's good, super good to meet you. We're kind of like, before we get out here. You'll see, I guess it was kind of warning we were talking earlier. Yeah, that's right. You'll see me, hopefully not like that. We're in town a lot. She's me, my father, and my daughter, but we're at the AMS truck, big Dodge, huge sticker down the side, always have a snowshoe trailer.
Yeah, which one do you have? You have the,
No, I just don't want to.
Big truck.
You were.
So yeah, in the winter, like one of the few, we're always in. And in the summer, we're always out. I'm just getting my father-in-law, next to long, Jesus here. He parks his boat in the ferry.
I recognize it, just didn't really say it. Yeah.
And we're always bringing boats down for to see trout. I've known Chip, just nice to meet you because I'm always, I'm always around. It doesn't come without its, find a job that's fun.
But they're working.
Yeah, we don't have time, but we're going to spend all the time here. It's good to see you. Nice to hear about Margaret weeks, and we're going to since I was going to miss them, get ready to home anyways. I was like, I was going to
That's what I see.
Let me up here. Actually, I was already talking. We were just close to
Already about to myself.
We spent a lot of time at the
Top of my mind, and it came up last week, and now it's angry. I don't want to drag it in. No, I'll, yeah. It's a long conversation.
I don't think there's any, there's no immediate we're in a hard summer. But so if you ever see me anything, Scott knows how to find it.
Well, we updated well. Security in. Yeah, it's good talking to you.
Anyway, but our city, our is trying to contact Kansas City.
Well,
The board. Nobody's called him.
Well, you have to understand, Holly, sent an email to Holly. Holly's been gone for 30 and she didn't have direction from council. So it wasn't being ignored. So, yeah, it's just a couple of confluence things. So I'm on top of it now.
Okay.
So, I appreciate it. We'll be in touch. Okay, what do you do? I make no promises, you know that. I just do whatever I can.
Yeah.
Okay. Good to meet you. Again.
Change like underwear.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not doing
Nice to meet you. He's driving around town.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, not Suburban.
You do when your travels around town, summer, winter, if you never need anything, see my people, it's great, man.
I was gonna say the same thing. Same thing, green collar. I know you guys don't.
He's been a good supporter.
You gotta step behind me there, Rob.
How much does a 55-gallon drum of fuel?
I'll talk to you soon. You got my brain. I gotta get to this place.
Not too much.
No,
Because I want to wait till
Yeah.
pick up my alligator.
Yeah.
Pick up my shrimp and all the stuff. And everything's up to March.
Good one.
So I'm going to wait till March. Never know down there. So yeah, we're going for a week.
You got me going again.
I'm waiting.
It's starting again. It's starting now. Have a great day.
I'm ready. I feel like going to wait. I told my mom never. I'm not coming. Besides, I had to stay down there 2 months last year to help my sister. I don't really
How many days in the year are the worst things that happen to you?
Yeah. I told them, no, y'all not going to see me in Texas and Louisiana this year. I'll see y'all in March.
Right on, Gwen. Well, good to see you and have
Y'all
a,
have a good time. Let's go winter.
we'll see you in the new year.
In the new year, my man. Texas, that's winter.
Yep, looking forward to it. God willing, I'll live that long.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to enjoy my time.
And,
I need a phone.
Is that Maylene or?
What? Oh, that's mine.
That's a girl's phone, it's got flowers on it.
Thanks. Nice observation, you should be proud.
So, you know, the 41 slip on email, it was 40,000. Yeah. You know how much those things are going for now? Over 100,000. And you know why?
right, that's the thing. That demand, pent-up demand is there,
We're walking with.
and they just forget it.
But I think,
You know what I mean? Well, that
no,
data
because
set
they were given marching orders to just go with this. And I thought the city was all behind it. Oh, they have. This is meetings and all.
This is my first blush at 6 lanes, 6 ramps.
You know, I don't care if it's four.
Congratulations or condolences.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 3 launch facilities.
3 knocks?
3 of the.
But when this all started, as a function of the closure of the West Ramp, we started out looking for a tractor launch down there to handle the overflow. I mean, it's that simple, and we had problems with that. But
This thing just ran again.
They should come here now, man.
So that you can expand later, without having to go back to.
Well, it is there, but it would require another mobilization, but spending all available federal dollars makes sense at the same time. We're doing okay.
I was just telling Victor and Dave. Who are the two guys? Ram Ross. I think Dan was one.
Council, may I ask for a motion?
Thanks, Dave. If I don't see you, I'll be on.
Happy Thanksgiving.
You too. It's gonna be it'll be after Hanukkah.
I'm out of here.
Ask for a motion taking us into executive session.
I'll make a motion to go into executive session.
I'll grab my hat.
Just wait a second, I need to discuss the matters you probably knew regarding address. Okay. Make a motion to do an executive session to discuss the manager contract matters. Ready to knowledge of which would clearly have an adverse effect upon the finances of a public entity.
Second.
Any discussion? Unanimous consent? Council will move to executive session at 8:45.
Is camera off?
I'm going to turn off the camera and mute the YouTube, turn off our mics, and we will be safe.
Dan, is Dutch coming back?
Pardon?
Is Dutch coming back?
No, that's what the break is about. Basically, Jim wants to study the situation. And be
mics are.
So technical.
Sorry. What?
You said we out there.
You gotta be one.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, are you leaving?
No, I'm gonna
Oh, okay.
go to the bathroom, I'll be right back.
Mike's not on.
Yeah, it takes a while for it to hop on.
There we go. Make a motion to come out of executive session.
Second.
Any discussion? Unanimous consent? Now back into regular meeting.
Okay, moving on to unfinished business. Is there anything that needs to be discussed under unfinished business? Is there any burning desires there?
I don't have anything at this time, yeah, we could hold it off,
Okay. Moving on to new business. Cruise ship dock request.
Oh, that's in the packet? It's the last page of the packet.
Yeah, they want 35,000.
So I was thinking from last meeting, I requested that we get like more info or a presentation. This is what they sent.
Well, because the Army Corps of Engineers was coming in and the tunnel schedule,
True.
I thought that they were going to give a more profound report. Because when I spoke to him, he said that he was going to be in on the weekend to work on it, and by Monday, he sent it via email. So
By Monday, what?
by Monday, he sent via his email. I was expecting a packet, but it looked like he sent his proposal through the email.
So to make it clear, we need more information
yes.
before you have to.
Oh, yes. I would like to, so this is what I would like to see on it. I want to know how much they're putting in on it, what each project is they're projecting the cost to be, what they're putting in, and what part of our money will go toward it.
Percentage.
Mm-hmm.
So, my understanding is that AML is contributing, but so is Princess. So, they're,
So whoever's putting in what?
Yeah.
That would be great.
We'll follow through.
Okay, question about that dock. Is that dock?
can we have this brought forward on our special meeting?
If they provide the information, yes.
Right, well,
Just in case.
I suspect that they will. Okay. Moving on to, what happened to Peter? City manager contract. So, we had a discussion about our city manager, and the decision was made to hire Jim Hunt as our new city manager, and we have come to terms, and the resolution will be coming forward in our next special meeting on December 4th.
Can I get all the information you're going to do?
Is that the rest of the next regular meeting?
No.
December 4th is Tuesday.
Wait. Okay.
Is that everything?
Oh, yeah, that's like the.
Should we put C and D on the special meeting as well?
We would like to see something.
I can't see,
New business, staffing needs and short-term goals for our new manager.
well, let's see what we got. Are you ready to do any recommendations for 2019 staffing needs, Jim?
Mr. Mayor, I kind of recommend, outside of the one open position we have in Public Works, that we not make any changes at this time. And as far as any additions or omissions, any projections, until we have a pretty firm hand on our financial situation in the budget.
Establishment of administrative short-term goals. Peter?
I have a couple ideas. So, as we start on a new path with the new city manager here, we basically agree, he's allowed us to do what previous managers would call some micromanaging here, and I'm hoping to establish some short-term goals focused on administration only, not encompassing all the other things that are surrounding the regular city business, and establish a couple of attainable timelines to be adjusted as need be as time goes by. And so, yesterday I sat down with Jim and Dave Pincush, and so I'm just going to kind of review what we discussed for your perusal, see if it makes sense. Dave did a little bit of eyebrow rolling, as he usually does when I'm talking, but no specific dissent is what I walked away from his opinion. But so, in establishing goals, general perception, short-term, medium-term, long-term goals. And don't even want to, other than the notion of establishing administrative policy for the city and cleaning up our code to remove the subjectivity, the conflicts, and is where I'm going to try to pose my specific focus here. So as we go forward, we've got a special meeting on December 4th that's going to be dedicated to the city manager contract. I will likely be able to be on the phone for the December meeting, but basically going ahead. So for goals for December, the city manager contract, I think we've resolved that today, but we still have to do the paperwork to be accomplished early in December by the end of the year. The budget, of course, needs to be done here. And I think Mr. Hunt has an idea. The administration does not have all the information it needs, I think, to prepare a working budget at this time. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, I'm trying to reiterate some of the things that we discussed. In that the 2019 budget is going to essentially be a mirror image of 2018 to likely be amended when we get into March and April. Is that a fair statement?
Correct. And there's some minor tweaks that we understand that'll come from the police department, maybe Public Works or Harbor, but they'll be really small.
Yeah,
but then we'll have a true up in April will probably be good.
A true up.
Yeah.
Okay, it is a good way to put it. So, and so the budget process, given that, we should be able to pass a budget by the end of the year, knowing it's still going to require some work going forward. Hopefully for the December meeting, if it goes into January, because this somehow got hot here, and this is something that got dropped better part of a year ago, but to ask the administration to give us some marketing possibilities for the P12 building. Hopefully for the December meeting, if that goes to January, not to do anything specifically, but just marketing possibilities. Annie, we talked about months ago, water bottling, beer, advertising in those. There's been conversation about hiring a commercial realtor, whatever it may be. And my quick follow-up statement on that thought was, the council essentially, last time we talked about this, or I perceived a general agreement on the council that we are looking for a more diversified industry in Whittier. I understand we have a potential buyer for the P12 building right now, and that the impetus for that might just be to simply save the utilities in the P12 building this winter. And $60,000 is what it costs us to keep that building open. But I think the long-term benefit of a diversified industry may well overcome that expense. So anyway, whether it's seafood processing, some sort of bottling plant, or any other number of possibilities, just to expose us to marketing possibilities so we can decide which direction to go. If that's possible for the December meeting, that would be great. And then, Jim, as you jump in here with both feet, for the January meeting, I've been making a lot of noise the next couple of meetings, because when we went through our last transition, we were talking about our status, that we were in a state of emergency. And we never made an official proclamation of that, but it's been perceived that way and discussed. And I'm gonna, as of this moment, I'm gonna stop with that noise, but what I would like to have the council ask the city manager to do, if in the January meeting, you can bring us basically a state of the city address. An expanded, the city manager's report is focused to specific issues, but a general overview of what you need so we can help you establish the goals to get to where we're all hoping to get for down the road. Does that make any sense? And the state of the city would basically be a statement of the issues that we're going through, and the priorities that brings us. To bring us into focus of what we need to do when. So by the end of January, we should have a better grip of what is actually in front of us. And going into so those are the thoughts I have for short-term goals. I don't consider them onerous. They're all, it's pretty subjective, but we know what works in front of us here for the next month or two. Any notion of long-term goals beyond 2019, I think we are going to stumble into if we do when we get into comp plan issues. So I'm not even going to address any long-term goals. That's going to come out in the watch. But for medium goals, I'd like to ask for an administrative policy outline, a draft, on the January meeting. So that'll give us the skeleton of what policy administration would pose to install. And that's going to lead to a lot of work from counselors on this table to whatever degree we're going to do this in-house. This has to be tailored for the city of Whittier, whatever template we may be going forward with here. So it's going to, this is something that I'm going to focus a lot of my attention and time on, is going through this. And remembering that policy is fluid as opposed to the rigidity of what is written in ordinance. And the policies can be adjusted, and we're not, but would like to have an outline of that basic backbone available for us to start thinking about in January. I think our Girdwood contract is up at the end of next year, and sometime in the March or April, we should be coming up with a proposal if we are going to, in fact, aspire to that contract again. So that would be for the council to address that over the winter time, and come March or April, we would be able to forward our offer to Girdwood if that is still in play at that time. and that would give us enough time to complete that contract and make any appropriate, take any appropriate actions. As a function of the comp plan, I've been using the wrong nomenclature. I've been calling it a master development plan or a real estate development plan, and Jim corrected me and calling it a future land use plan. Once again, the few plots that are in play here, the head of the bay, the Glacier Avenue property, that which is going on the Shotgun Cove Road is going to come about of its own process. And then the Whittier Manor is a component of that as well. And everything I saw going on here tonight, that's probably going to take a turn for the stupid before it gets any better. But we can't really do anything with the railroad with this in there, and time is short. That contract is up at the end of next year, so I'll be interested to see hear what the manor is actually thinking, if they in fact are at all. Anyway, for that future land use development plan, would like to see some sort of, this will be a component of the comp plan, presumably, which is typical in most comp plans, Jim, from our conversation, that this is an integral part. That sometime by March, April, we should have at least a framework of what that should look like. So basically, I would call it an outline again of a future land use plan. Preferably the March meeting. Things are going to start to heat up in April to give us time to think about it as well. And then the longer term goal would be completion of a comp plan by the end of next year. That's a reasonable goal.
Might I,
Oh, please.
and address the future land use. It is a critical component of any comprehensive plan. But in addressing that, it's normally addressed instead of separate and exclusive of the comp plan meetings. It also takes place as part of the meetings and the development of the plan. So we're kind of excising that out in advance. Where I'd like to possibly suggest keeping that, within the context of the general meetings as the succession, goes forward. Because it is, with what we have, we know our path, we have all the documents, all the data, everything. I would recommend that we proceed with the development and an RFP for that comp plan here to get it going.
Okay. Is it reasonable to expect that our comp plan update to be completed by the end of 2019?
Yeah.
Okay. So that would reach that far, and I'm still focused on this future land use plan. It is a component of the comp plan, but
It'll be the major focus. I mean, for the most part, because we're all, not only are we talking the land use, but the zoning, projected zoning, those two overlap.
okay.
And that's key and critical.
So, but we're only looking at 4 parcels, right? Some of them are bigger than others. Knowing Shotgun Cove Road is a project unto itself, but a stated, we're talking about a boat ramp at the head of the bay, or a boat launch now, whatever momentum this is going to carry going forward. And I shared with Jim the conceptual plan for head of the bay development that was written sometime 8 or 10 years ago. So even going through the comp plan process, given the land ownership issues at the head of the bay, I don't know that we will get there to any degree. And my rationale for accelerating the future land use plan is because I do expect us to be re-engaging with master lease issues via one process or another. I've heard that the railroad is singing a little bit different tune these days. This is nothing I haven't heard before. And my contention is whoever we're talking to about either overturning the master lease or having somebody cede or deed head of the bay land to us, the first question is, what do you want it for? And what we have today is that conceptual plan to say, here it is.
Married up with our earlier project with the court.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it is consistent with that. The only inconsistency on that concept is our gravel parking lot at the head of the bay isn't shown there. So it's
Just one little aspect, because, you know, we're all aware of the properties. If we go 5 miles up and look down, there is a lot of other commercial and private activity here, where you also have a say in planning and zoning everybody what they would like to see in the future.
okay.
So we're not just restricted. I mean, you know, that broader umbrella like that concept, just come up a few more miles and take a look and say, is everything out here going to be static and say just like it is for the next 10 years?
Okay, well, and then we have another possible parcel, the 7 acres of the old Marston property. It is gonna fall into here as well. So, but rather than going into the comprehensive plan blank, is when we get into the public comment period is, this is what we got so far. And then let this conversation stem from there, and it can certainly be adjusted. So that's why I'm arguing that the future land use plan can get a little bit ahead of the comp plan, and it will be a useful tool in other conversations other than the comp plan.
So how do we do that? That future land, are you talking about having some?
We basically create a document. I mean, you have in the sewer comprehensive plan that you showed up, there it was.
It's stated in a document, right?
The railroad has a master plan for Whittier. If you've never seen it, it's only 2 pages, and it's rather all encompassing. It allows us to have an intent at this time. We're not married to it in any way, shape, or form.
And, you know, in taking our time, and basically, you know, if we really want to, you know, shorten and compress this, you know, and build off it, we can pass a resolution with the statement, stating the properties and the goals and the visions that they're going to be working on developing, and then it's stamped and then record.
With that, though, do we need to go through like planning and zoning? Does that need to go through those channels?
Not
Do we need to do
necessarily.
anything like with the
Not
community stuff
necessarily, it
yet?
could be, this is currently the council's vision that it is going to be fully vetted and developed, but this is what we're looking at now, and these are our challenges, and, you know, that we're going to begin, you know, working on in advance.
And then take
It's
it?
basically a resolution, it's a statement.
Okay.
It's a statement.
And I'm not even saying that this is a good idea, but it's what we have. And we can fill a hole in our visioning here. And that can be held up during comp plan. This is what we're thinking so far, and we'll get a lot of input, rest assured. But, pardon me, I didn't incorporate that. I don't want to let that 7 acres of old Marston property fall off the radar too, and see how we may be able to incorporate that into our thinking. And then, and then the other medium-term goal was to come up with a trued-up budget by March, April at the latest. And guys, that's kind of what I've come up with so far.
Peter, you listed everything that I've got on my list, and the only thing I've added in addition to that would be, you know, the leases. You know, we need to start working on the leases.
Okay.
And I realize that might be more long-term, but that's what I had in my more.
Okay, well, it has been on our goals for a long time. And for the reasons that we can't seem to get there is I don't really think the chore is going to be that onerous. It's enforcing some of the clauses of those leases that is always going to be the big stumble here. I have 2 lots that are right next to each other with 2 different leases. you bring them to get, you make them consistent, great, you don't, it really does, the differences are minor. So before, when we talk about the leases, I'd like to talk about specifically what we want the leases to be. So.
And performance requirements, whatever that is.
And they are myriad and they are inconsistent, and so when we talk about the leases, I think maybe the goal would be to make the Uplands leases consistent with one another.
And we can do that as they come up. I've had a lot of experience this down south. Yeah.
Okay, so as we do this, could this be listed as a medium-term goal to discuss going into springtime, March, April, the standardization of leases? Is that Dave, is that a good way to present it?
I think so, yes.
I think that's the first step, is standardization.
I've also got the DeLong dock on my list. And just, I've been concerned about the operations of the DeLong dock. I don't know what kind of plans we have. I mean, I know it's a harbor master thing.
We talked about at the last meeting, creating an enterprise fund for the DeLong dock. So that would be the first administrative exercise there, would be to create that enterprise fund and the accompanying accounts. And then management of the dock is a different animal.
Yeah, but is this something we can get our arms around before next season? Or is it going to be status quo right on?
It's going to be a push. It's going to be a push. And we also we're in uncharted territory that we kind of accepted in that, as far as the operations and maintenance and the electric. 1 month we had a $2,800 electric bill. And we need to have some, so we need to, I mean, ideally, we have the enterprise fund, we basically lease it out as a section of land, I don't care if you want to say percentage, set value used, fish taxes, and then in individual meters, and then you guys would be more than happy to come in here and upgrade all the meters for all the use, so we get the generators off. It's just, it takes a little time.
Yeah, but the creation of an enterprise fund is simply an administrative maneuver, and then all revenues that pertain to the DeLong dock could be put into that enterprise fund to at least give us a grip on what we're taking in. And then we'll all start losing hair when we find out what needs to go out.
And that's where, that's step A, and then step B is the creation of the rules in order to track those funds and have an enforcement mechanism to make sure we are paid for the due to us.
The enterprise fund could be established during the true-up in March, April.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so is that reasonable, Jim, to creation of a DeLong dock enterprise fund by?
I'm committing staff to everything.
Okay.
So,
but it's starting to look heavy as we got.
Thank you, this is.
I think you asked that, if it looks like it's gonna be a lot going on.
Yeah, so, and then as we meet, we're gonna have our first goal review, January 1st, probably the March meeting. Moving targets as realities come at the same time.
yeah, we expect to push back and say, well, we have these roadblocks, we can't get that done, but we need to know what's happening.
And you'll be getting, as we now are establishing these, we'll be able to go forward, and we're gonna put them on the bottom, as addendums, to the agendas, so we know where we are, so we have our status update. In addition to, meetings and questions, so we'll have reports ongoing.
Okay, I'll be interested to see how we're carrying forward old business. We've tried a couple of different ways over the years.
This is the best way to do it.
Okay.
This is the best way to do it.
So,
Because sooner or later, if it does carry over, people go, why is that still on there, why hasn't it been done?
the long dock, you know, it was damaged towards the end of the season. Is it, I mean, the ultimate solution as far as to repair that damage, is there a possibility that we might be able to essentially do a triage such that they can at least get fish, you know?
I believe so. I'm sorry, I believe so. I don't want to, I haven't read it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be looking at that tomorrow and talking to Kyle and find out what the insurance status is.
So it just becomes a little bit of a hot potato if we don't have at least 3 loading positions, because all 3 of them are the most important enterprise in the city.
As they are.
Yeah. They all feel very important, and we want them to feel that. We want them to do business here, but especially because we got to pay for that dock.
Yeah. Okay. I'm checking the time. Ooh.
Okay, so, the creation of a DeLong, creation would be the action word of a DeLong Dock Enterprise Fund. March, April is a fair thought?
Fair.
Okay.
Our clerk is taking detailed notes. Yeah.
And Nailene, if you want to follow up, give me a ring.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's it in a nutshell.
I've got a bunch more.
Bring it. That's just for me.
No. The only thing, I mean, we've talked about, you know, the head of the bay, the tank farm property, you know, some of those things we know are down the road. Our webpage, we've talked about.
Yes.
Our webpage.
Yes.
If there's, and it doesn't have to be done in the next quarter or anything like that, if by the end of the year, something gotta be done with that.
Okay. So a new webpage by the end of the year?
If not sooner, man, we could really, it would really help us out. I think it would help us in a lot of different ways.
By the end of 2019.
By the end of 20, yes, by the end of 20, yes, correct. I'm sorry, I didn't. That was, yeah, sorry.
Website over.
Oh, yeah, that's a short-term goal.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a big short-term goal. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you for your indulgence. And please, anybody else hop in here. That's what, as far as my pea brain is gone.
And just feel free to, you know, send some suggestions and maybe take a look, and I'll just send it back with feedback. You know, and if there's, you know, do nailing for get consensus, you know, we have to do this as people or something, so, yeah.
So
It's an ongoing conversation.
I'm just hoping this process allows you as city manager to know what our priorities are on a temporal basis.
We're doing something fresh and new here, we continue the process and the meeting, so. And the public,
Okay. Moving on to council discussion. So, Jim, do we need to bring essentially the question of the letters that were asked from the Corps? Does that need to go to the special meeting, or can we give you consensus on those letters now?
you can just give me a consensus, you know.
Okay, so let's start with the railroad. That's an easy one. Okay, council intends to work with the railroad to work out that we have the priority and we have the right thing to do at the head of the bay with regard to the project that we're having down there, the breakwater.
Yeah, I noticed, yeah, that the GBOS, we use they raised their hands when they wanted to get a consensus.
Yes?
Girdwood, yeah, so.
Okay.
About what? What have we raised our hands on?
A letter, and, but it's from the railroad, right? We want to be able to.
We're basically saying that we're gonna work with the railroad to get, is that right, Jim?
To proceed with development and also address the,
Because of
with the spur line.
The spur line too
So
close to
there's
the
two,
road,
there's two issues right
etc.
there. And that,
Yeah, it doesn't
that you,
intermingle.
and that actually you can just all raise on one, you know, it's all as one.
So-
And that the city, you know, recognizes financial responsibility, although it's not in stone, and that we endorse the project. So it's kind of like,
And these letters are non-binding.
correct.
So the hand sign works good, but for the purposes of the recording, it looks like all is in favor. If there's anyone that's not in favor, please speak up. Hearing none. Okay, and then the next letter?
That's all of them. That was the only.
Oh,
That
so-
was on four. That was the spur, endorsing the project,
And that the city was
the city's financial stable, and we also support the project.
Okay, so that, all three letters?
Well, I'm really happy that we've gotten to that point with that, because $1 million in 11 years, and
Any further council discussion? Hearing none. Citizens discussion? Great.
Just a reminder, tomorrow at noon, the Thanksgiving lunch at the school, turkey, prime rib, bring some sides, great time, nice celebration, so come eat.
Okay.
yeah.
That's noon.
Okay. Ask for motion for adjournment. All in favor?
All right, thank you.
One of the questions was, what services would you like to see developed in Whittier that could done Mexican restaurant?
My guys, when I was on the walk-in, heading down, and food farm the next day.
Take a look at the donut hole down there.
Oh, you know, I could also call
It's a
it
shitty spot.
Yeah,
Yeah, no location.
I hate having the white piece of paper. There's a framework there. So it's actually right next to my computer. Yeah. I haven't forgot. It's back. It's on my piece of paper.
So he is stonewalling.
I'll follow up with it.
That's by switching
About
the
developing that land,
top.
replacing the building because
See, it says camera off media
during
on the bottom.
You can't do anything with it. But the restaurant that was there before.
So right here, so it says camera off, there you go.